What Jesus demands from the world has a very special place in my heart. It may have been the hardest book to write. For 4 months, I was working on this and doing nothing else. And I was doing it driven by a very simple statement in the Bible. The second half of the Great Commission is, after you shall go make disciples, baptizing them, it says, and you shall teach them to observe all that I have commanded you. So not just teach them all that I have commanded you, but teach them to observe it, that is, to do it. So this is a book about obeying all that Jesus commanded. And so I spent these months going through all 4 Gospels saying, all right, I'm going to try to discern the totality of what Jesus commanded without paying any attention to the epistles. So you go to the index here, I think out of the hundreds of texts in the index, there may be 2 that refer outside the Gospels. And so what I was after was not only canvassing every imperative that Jesus had in his mouth that I could then somehow organize into a book and teach how do we obey that, but also I wanted to do it in such a way that it was rooted in the gospel, rooted in the cross, because all the Gospels are written clearly as climaxing in what he did, and the Gospels themselves teach the gospel. And I wanted to root the imperatives in the indicatives of the gospel in such a way that if it were true, it would sound just like the epistles. Only I was not going to measure it by the epistles. So there's an agenda here. There's a theological agenda as well as a missiological agenda. I wanted to stick with the Gospels entirely and show that the message of Jesus in its imperative and its climactic indicative on the cross and the resurrection would produce a gospel life that would be compatible with, coherent with what we see in the epistles, because a lot of people put Jesus over against Paul. When I was doing my studies, it was Paul versus Jesus. And I never saw it. Every time I looked at the gospel, I said, why do they see these contradictions? And so this is an effort to be consistently riveted on the 4 Gospels, canvassing all the imperatives, gathering into groups, showing how they're to be obeyed, and rooting them in the cross as it emerges in the Gospels themselves. All of it with a view to fulfilling the Great Commission. Go, make disciples, baptize them, and teach them to observe everything I commanded.